Well, folks, here we are. It's another episode of the Soul Sessions. It's me, Soul. I'm glad to be back here after LA with WrestleMania, but here we are. Get ready, guys. It is Adonis Payne, my friend. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well. How are you?
Oh, very well. It's good to have another guest on the show. But Adonis, you call yourself the Conqueror, sword, shields, and facts. And I want to know, where did all that come from? What was it that makes you the Conqueror?
Um, for me, I started off very much just a brash, arrogant kind of guy, and then eventually, as the matches kept rolling on, I kept on. Initially in my training school, I got pushed into UBW, Ultimate British Wrestling, down in Bedfordshire, and I just started beating all of their former champions. So I thought the name just kind of suited at that point when I was coming up. I think I beat their first ever champion, Sunset Skip. I beat CJ Carter, who's unfortunately had to retire, Charles Crowley, and just kind of started taking names along the way. So it suited me from that point onwards. And then tag team partner Artemis came into the things, and both got Greek style names. We just thought, let's go down the Odyssey route. We just
Wow.
became a dominant force as a team instead.
Well, that's a hell of a title, my friend. Who knows? Maybe we might see a Legion form in the future.
There's room for expansion. We've spoken about expansion.
Ooh, see, surprises in store. But Adonis, let's take it back a wee bit.
Yeah.
As how did you fall in love with professional wrestling to start off with? Was it something as a kid, or did you get later on in life?
Yeah, I think it was the same as probably a lot of people that you've spoken to. Very much early doors. Just I remember it being on the TV, the bright lights, the big stages. Of course, when I sort of came into things at the start of the Ruthless Aggression era, so it was very much big stages, bright lights, lots of pyro, and I think that grips your attention to begin with. And then just straight from the opening scenes of whatever show it was, you then get into the in-ring action, and it's just heavy hitting. It's definitely punishment. People take a lot of punishment doing it. At that time, you were seeing a hell of a lot of blood, and you just thought it was ruthless. So I don't know if I was a weird kid that liked that or not, but it just gripped me from there. And I always watched it at weekly basis, whether it was on the Saturday mornings because I was too young to stay up on the Friday nights to watch SmackDown, or same all throughout the week with Raw. It was just something that I had to get involved in from that point onwards. It just gripped me. So yeah, very much early doors.
Well, absolutely. You mentioned the ruthless aggression era there. Who were the stars of that era that really stand out to you and resonate with you?
I think the first person that really gripped me, to be honest, was Edge. And again, I don't know if I was weird because he was such an arsehole as a wrestler. I don't know if I was weird, but he was always my favorite. And I think it was just that brash overconfidence. I just really enjoyed his work. Obviously, the spear went on to be iconic. It's one of my favorite moves, which I don't actually do it myself, which is bizarre, but it's just one of those such impactful quick moves, can come out of nowhere. But Edge always got me. Randy Orton as well, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio is a classic. You can't beat a bit of high flying, but I think it was always Edge. Edge has been my hero for a long time.
Yeah, no, of course, Edge has been a true talent. And, recently at WrestleMania 39, he had his Hell in a Cell match against Finn Balor.
Yeah, unbelievable.
It was a hell of a match. What are your thoughts on that, Adonis?
I think for me, I've always watched Edge as a heel in those kind of scenarios. And the same very much with the Demon Finn Balor has always been babyface. So to swap them roles around, I didn't know how it was going to go initially, whether it would, Hell in a Cell is obviously going to light up an occasion no matter what, but I think they smashed it out of the park, especially with the little injuries that were picked up. And then obviously right at the end, having to cut early. You wouldn't have noticed that match was cut early with that 14 stitches or whatever Finn Balor had to have in the back of his head. I've split my head open, but not that bad. To even walk out of the arena with that, it was just incredible. But it was a great match, obviously. I think that whole WrestleMania was really good in terms of the surprise element. I know there was a lot of complaints about the last match and Cody should have finished the story, but for me, I think it was a great surprise. Everybody was nailed on. Cody's walking away with the belt, so when Roman gets the win, it's a big surprise. It lets everybody down, but a letdown in a good way, because you're like, well, where are they going now?
Exactly.
Who can
we
take
never know where the story's going. Exactly, of course. But I don't know, the whole internet's parted on this. Cody should have won. Roman shouldn't have won. Do you feel like, obviously, you're saying there's a right call for Roman to win?
I don't know if right is the word. I think it could have been right or wrong both ways, whichever way you go about it. Was it too soon for Cody? He came back, he had some great matches, but then he was out injured for a lot of months, came back, got put in the spot to win the Rumble. Would it have been too quick? So I see both sides. I think the 1,000-day reign is almost getting a bit tedious now, where you're like, okay, you've gone through Drew, you've gone through Brock, you've gone through even Finn Balor, Daniel Bryan, Edge. Who is the caliber of superstar that's going to beat Roman Reigns? At the minute, you're at a loss because it's not Cody. So who else? It wasn't Seth either in the Rumble last year.
Yeah,
See, it's generated a lot of questions, which, I mean, I'm just happy to watch it play out. But for me, I would have liked to have seen Cody win it, but I'm not disappointed either way.
Well, fair enough. Is there anyone in mind you would like to see dethrone the Tribal Chief?
Edge, I think, but I don't think it's going to happen. Obviously, any match that I see him in, I'd love to see him win it. I'd like to see him get the big one more time, because he's one that hasn't completed his redemption arc. You know, people talk about Cody Rhodes' redemption arc. Edge came back from 10, 11 years injured and won the Rumble, didn't get the win over Roman. It would be nice for him to win it. I can't see him winning it. I think anybody at this point, it'll be a nice surprise.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And, you know, you're such a big fan of Edge, and, you know, Edge is saying that this is maybe his last year. He wants to retire in Toronto. As a fan, is there a particular match you want to see be Edge's final match?
In an ideal world, John Cena, whether he'd be around for it. I think that rivalry, especially through my childhood, shaped my love of wrestling completely. I think he's the only one. If not, then maybe Randy Orton, but I think that's just been more of a recent rivalry. It was never a huge rivalry back then. I think it'd have to be John Cena for that final moment. Whether they could both put on a caliber of match that they could have done 12, 15 years ago, I would probably say, yeah, they could. But I think that one would be something special, just to finally close the chapter on, okay, that's the end of the rivalry. We're both moving on to pastures new now, on to the next guys.
And of course, always the moving on from the generation and looking to the brighter future, as they say.
Yeah.
You know, Adonis, you know, you were then progressed into an actual wrestler. So I want to know the story of you training, and when was the moment you finally decided this is the path I want to go down in my life?
So I think it was 2018, I started looking into it. I'd finished up with football. I mean, I never really played at a massive level, but I finished up with football and decided that I needed something else to keep me going. So at first I just viewed it as, this is going to be a hobby for me. Let's go down, see if I can do it, keep myself busy. And I delayed it for a year, and I didn't actually get around to starting training until the April of 2019. And then I joined Square One Academy, which at the time was based in Henlow, which was the academy development for UBW. And I decided that that was the route I was going to go. So I went down on a couple of one-to-one sessions with Hugo Bloom, who was a trainer at that point. Still is a trainer, but not the full beginner's trainer. Loved it from the very beginning, just loved it. I felt comfortable. I think it was maybe where I was a goalkeeper in football. I found going down quite a lot easier than, and not really intimidating to take a bump or anything like that. And I just felt like I'd gripped onto it fairly quickly. So that progression, being able to progress really quickly, obviously kept me intertwined in wanting to train more and more and more. And after, say, 5 or 6 one-to-one sessions, I decided I'm going to join the group sessions with the other guys, which was so intimidating for me. And I think a lot of people that walk into wrestling, that you don't know how long other people have been training. So my whole reason for doing the one-to-ones instead of just jumping straight into the group sessions was because I didn't want to slow anybody down as the new guy coming in. But as it turned out, when I was joining these beginner sessions, there was guys that were training a year. There was guys that were training 2 weeks, 4 months. You know, it was so different, the levels of ability that they cater to every level.
Yeah.
So that, as soon as I found that out, made me feel so comfortable. There's actually a guy, Jackson Hart, who I still have matches with, still see all the time down here, that coincidentally only started training 2 months before me. But when I got there, you would have thought he was training for a year or two before, because he was so smooth with everything that he was trying and everything he was doing. And I just thought he was already, you know, a part of this industry. But it just shows that some people can grip onto it and within months be very, very talented. And Other people, it might take a bit longer. For me, I was sort of, I would say, mid-ground.
Okay, wow. I mean,
There was certain aspects that I got quickly, certain that even now I still struggle with.
no, well, every day's a learning day, my friend. But I mean, you mentioned your background in football, and for our American viewers, this is real football. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we've had, other guests who have had backgrounds in dance and some who've had in American football. For your background in football, real football, shall we say,
Yeah.
how did that help with your training?
I found it did in certain aspects and in others not so much. So,
Mhm.
for example, in certain moves where you've got to completely dive on your front, I was never used to that. So I was always going down on my side, which was obviously causing some issues. So that was a bit of a learning curve. Another issue I struggled with is we learn in England everything's sort of right dominant, and I'm completely left-sided. Everything on my left side is so dominant in every aspect of my life that when it came to learning everything on the right, that was a struggle, but that has no correlation. But yeah, I would say it helped me, like I said, with bumps, with getting up quick to my feet. Everything like that was pretty sharp. Moving around, I felt comfortable with. It was mainly just getting to grips with the actual wrestling side of wrestling. The movement, the taking the bumps was absolutely fine. It was literally just the holds, positioning, certain moves. That was what I had to learn early doors to get me up to speed.
Yeah, of course, no, absolutely. And obviously, football and wrestling are very athletic competitions. Would you say that they're on par on an athletic level, or do you feel like they're totally different beasts and you can't really compare that?
I think they're completely different beasts, but in my experience, I mean, like I said, I never really reached a tremendous level, so I wouldn't be able to tell you on a professional side of things of like a very high professional level side of things on football. But for me, wrestling has been so demanding. Like I said, you go into training even today earlier on, you're coming away feeling it, whether you take any bumps or not. It's so intense. It's very demanding. Every little movement, you've got to think about it before you do it. Make sure your position is right. Because, I mean, it can just be one loose limb and you can injure somebody else or yourself. And even just moves that you can take well trained can cause injuries. I've watched it firsthand where somebody that I know has done dives thousands of times throughout his career, did one and broke his leg. And it's just, the pressure that it puts on your body is just unlike nothing else, in my opinion.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a hell of a thing. It just really shows that even though you're still training, it could just be as dangerous as having a match.
Yeah, it can be it can come at any point. Injuries can occur whenever, and most of the time, it's the things that you can do 9 times out of 10 that cause your injury, whereas the things that you try maybe once a year come off absolutely fine, and you're scared about doing it. It's just the way it works, I think.
Very true, my friend. Is there a particular move you look at and you think, yeah, nah, I ain't touching that. That's nowhere near something I want to try.
I don't know. I'd like to try a lot of things. Whether my body can do them or not is a different. Like I would love to do a moonsault. My body tells me no at the minute. I can't backflip for anything. I always go over 2 sideways, so I just don't bother. But I've seen, I think it was Leon Slater even yesterday at 1PW doing the jump over the corner of the turnbuckle, just one-handed post over the top, spinning twice in midair and landing on a group of people. That's probably something that I'd draw the line at and go, do you know what? I wouldn't even want to try that because I'd never be able to do it. My hand would just end up slipping and I'd face plant the steel post. That would be my luck.
Well, I mean, if that image is captured, you put on a shirt, get some money off. But Adonis, I know you would become a champion for Square One. You win their championship. Winning that title and being your first title as well, I'm guessing as well. What did that mean to you?
That meant everything. And I think mainly because the first show at Square One I helped out at was the crowning of the first ever Square One champion at that point, which was pre-COVID. So I went and helped out at that after a training session. And I watched the first champion get crowned. And I remember sitting there going, at one point, I want that belt, not out of anything, just something to aspire to. I feel like I set myself goals and I try and hit them. So, for example, like this year, my goal is 10 debuts in the year. And that'll be something that I'll work to throughout the year. Whereas at that point, it was, let's see if I can get a hold of that championship at some point. There was no time limit on it. Obviously, we then had the pandemic. It had just changed hands to its second owner, Jimbo, at the time. And then when we came back from the pandemic, I was thrown at the deep end on the main UBW shows. So for me, I thought that maybe that goal had passed. Maybe I was just going to, leapfrog that barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was in the December I was told that I was winning it. Jimbo wanted to retire. I was next in line. And I think even when I was told, nothing can defeat the feeling of actually winning it at first.
Mm-hmm.
It took a while for it to settle in, I suppose. You go from, especially the way that we run Square One is they've got their own academy shows, which now we're doing academy shows in front of 100 and 150 people. They're not viewed in the same light as a UBW show, but we're getting similar attendances. It's cheaper ticket prices, and people know what to expect. It's the breeding ground for the main shows.
Mm-hmm.
So to go from just being a part of that to main eventing every show that I was on for Square One was incredible, really, and it really clicked in a weight of responsibility, but so much pride at the same time.
Yeah, no, I mean, hell of a pressure as well for you as well. Jimbo coming to you and saying, "Hey, I want to drop the title to you." Did you feel like that's like a self-validation? Like, wow, people are trusting me with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So he said it to the main promoter. He said that I should be next in line, which is what I've recently found out, which I'm so thankful for. He didn't have to do that. It could have gone to a number of people at that time. But obviously I was the lucky one that was chosen. It was just immense pride that other people were looking at me saying you deserve it, from the main promoter Paul Ash, even Hugo Bloom saying you've worked hard since we've come back. You've kept on it throughout the pandemic where you couldn't really do too much. I was constantly studying. I think I had the network on nearly every day. I mean, it was just something to do, wasn't it? You know what I mean? But I'd adapted my gimmick at that point from just where I'd started, the brash, arrogant kind of guy, into where I want to be now, which I'm more comfortable in, which is the conqueror, how I view myself, how I hold myself. And I just decided from that point onwards, that was the way I was going to go. And for people to look at me and say, you've done really well here. You've started off really strong. Like I said, I was putting at the deep end with guys that were, work in progress throughout the lockdown when they were doing their Camden shows. So for me to not only have been put in that spot, but to then reap the rewards at the end of it, it was huge pride. And even now being given the tag titles later on, it was just fantastic. It's one of those moments where you go, I'm doing something right here. Let's keep working at it and keep working. I think the key point is to not stop, because it's very easy to hit that mark and go, okay, I'm the champ now. I've clearly done it. I've done it all. I think there's never a moment where you need to stop. You've got to consistently keep on it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, hey, be proud of yourself, pal, for doing so well and just with what you've done. And you mentioned during the pandemic, we've had guests on who've done no crowd shows and they learned from that. But you mentioned having the network on. What was it you felt like you learned from studying the network during the pandemic?
I'll be honest, I watched it purely for enjoyment. It was never at that point where I was sat there thinking, this is going to teach me something. We obviously had the group chat going on every pay-per-view that was coming through. We were watching it as a group. A lot of us, I'd missed the vast majority, but I was purely watching it for enjoyment. But if I saw something that was cool or that I liked, I was putting it in the notes in my phone for when we got back to training that I could try it and give it a go. Okay. And it was very much just, I was just enjoying myself throughout the pandemic. I wouldn't say that I necessarily worked hard. I would say that I kept myself in decent fitness in cardiovascular wise, less so strength, because it's pretty impossible to do so. But in terms of just watching the network, it was going back. I set myself from 1998 at the start of the Attitude Era and just watched all the way through every pay-per-view, just killing time more than anything. And any single time that I thought, that's a cool move, I'll note that down. I like the way he does this, he does that. She does this, she does that. I was noting everything down and just wanting to use it going forward. And most of the stuff I've still got on my phone. I haven't even touched because I don't need to at this point, because there is a limit on how many moves you can have in your move set.
Yeah, you've got a limit gauge. You can't surpass the megabyte of your heart. But I mean, you mentioned like watching from the Attitude Era and onwards. Did you feel like you noticed like the progression of wrestling from like you're like just from time? Was it like did it hit you quickly, or was it, wow, I'm seeing the evolution of wrestling in front of me while watching it?
I think WWE did really well with the storylines continuing through, that when things changed over from, obviously you saw the difference in product, you saw especially from the ruthless aggression to the PG era, you saw the stoppage of blood, you saw like the changes in the brutality of, say, no disqualification matches, but in the general product of a standard singles match, standard tag match, you definitely were reading from the same song sheet. It was very much similar. Obviously there's different spots, different talent, right? I think the only one where you look at and go, wow, that's different, is the women's division. And rightfully so, because it went from being just models that were coming in, just basically used as eye candy, trained the bare minimum in wrestling just to put on a show, to now you've got professional wrestlers wrestling as well, if not better than most of the male roster. You know, it only shows that probably for the past couple of WrestleManias, Bianca Belair has had one of the best matches of the night. Whereas if you went back to 1998, you'd have been lucky to see a women's match on WrestleMania that wasn't just an eye candy kind of match for a load of the lads. So that's the main one that you see developmental wise. But everything's been for the better. Maybe not the PG era in some side of things, but I think they're looking at a market where they can get merchandise sales, and little kids will buy more merchandise than 40-year-old adults.
It is a business at the end of the day, but I think we could do less with the anonymous GM for Raw. I think that was
yeah, that was a weird one. I did kind of enjoy the heat that Michael Cole got from it, though. I think he did that part really well. I think it's nice to have a figure there, but at the same time, it generated heat and it got what you wanted out of it.
It got the results at the end of the day. Now, I know you would obviously go into tag team with the Odyssey. You know, yes. How did the Odyssey's first initial creation begin?
This is one of my favorite stories because it was a brisk conversation. So it was December of 2021, I want to say. Artemis was about to have her first ever match on a Square One show. I was doing a number one contenders match before I'd eventually go on and win the belt. And she just looked at me and went, well, I'm Artemis, you're Adonis. We should do a tag team. And I was like, yeah, that would be a really cool idea, actually. Why don't we do that? And then it kind of went under the radar a little bit. And then the more and more we were talking, we were going, well, we could be called the Odyssey. Oh, yeah, that would be brilliant. We were both just chatting away, going, let's see if we can actually do this. And months would pass, and then we eventually formed a stable called the Meme Team, which had memes of it, and we were the tag team unit out of that. And that was when we were like, okay, we're going to do this tag team thing now, but if we're doing it, we're going to do it properly. We want to take ourselves to different promotions. We don't just want to do it through this one stable down this one company. And luckily, Memes was brilliant at going, there's these two new guys that are wanting to work everywhere. They're in my stable. I can bring them in. We can do it here, there, and everywhere. So we started off like that. Eventually have now broken off into our own tag unit away from the Meme Team at some promotions. And it's gone surprisingly well, to say that it was just a brisk conversation that we'd never really planned or even trained together at that point. It was literally a one-off conversation. Okay, yeah, you go out, have a good debut. Let's see what happens. And then now you're talking just over a year down the line, or a year and a half down the line, we're double champions at two different companies and getting debuts everywhere that we could possibly think of.
Well, see, Adonis, sometimes the greatest plans come from just little conversations.
it was just bizarre. I mean, I remember us having our first tag match together properly. I think it was in the June of 2022 against two guys, Westside Heat, that are very close to us, Smashing Mike and James Toner. And we went out there and everything just went so well in terms of, from the planning stage. We were both really nervous before. I mean, it was the first proper tag match I'd been a part of. I think very much the same for Artemis. I think she maybe had one or two before that. But for us as a team, it was our first one. The mechanics of it, we were in control as the heels. And we got out the back afterwards and just looked at each other and went, well, that happened. Well, that went very well. And then the promoter came out and went, okay, you guys are going to stay as a tag team. And then in the October, we were given the belts. it was just one of those where everything we've seemed to have done from that minute has just exceeded our expectations of what we thought we were capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just the bar's been set now, and we just need to keep on working at it and keep on growing and keep on getting better.
Of course, and hey, you've got double gold actually under both of your belts, and
Yeah.
it's really breaking the norm. Usually we have male tag teams and women tag teams separate. How did you feel? Do you feel like this is breaking the mold, and this is what maybe the standard of tag team wrestling should become?
For me, I didn't really see it as breaking the mold, because Artemis has got a massive powerlifter, strong woman background. So she's done gymnastics. She was so powerful with everything that she did. She was a hell of a lot stronger than I was. At the time, I hadn't really been working out much, so I was a stick when we first started. I was really skinny, and she was the muscle, I was the mouth. So that was already breaking down your stereotypical norms. I think it's becoming far more common now. It still is quite new. There's still a few promotions that don't really want to do intergender wrestling yet, just because of the backlash that it may receive. But I think most people inside the wrestling community just see it as two wrestlers that are teaming together against another team of wrestlers. And what's quite good for us was, I think, the last 3 tag matches we had, which were at Wrestling Society, UBW, and again another UBW show, were all intergender matches. So it was me and Artemis against Paul Hubris and Shauna Reed was one of them. Rishi Ghosh and Nadia Sapphire was another, and Charles Crowley and Alexis Falcon in another. So for that to have happened on a consistent basis just shows me that it's just becoming normal wrestling now, and there shouldn't really be a stigma on it, or we shouldn't have promotions going, oh, we don't normally do intergender stuff, but we might have a look at you later down the line if things change. And I'd like to see it be put on some big stages now. I mean, you're seeing it quite a lot on the WWE note where Rhea Ripley's getting involved, but none of the male roster are wanting to get their own back. And I'm looking at it as she's a very strong woman that can hold herself. It's just wrestling. And I do understand the backlash that can come from it. But I think wrestlers should be viewed as wrestlers, and that's it.
No, of course, absolutely. You're all wrestlers at the end of the day doing the one thing you love inside the squared circle. I want to know, is the Odysseys, there's many other tag teams here in the UK, from Rev Pro to ICW up in Scotland, everywhere. Is there a particular team you maybe want to take on?
I think for both of us, we've had this conversation quite a few times. I've always lent towards the Greedy Souls being one of my number one matches. I've watched them so many times up close. We both do the ring crew at Riot Cabaret, and we've seen them so many times up close, and they're so good. Sunshine Machine is another one that we'd love to be across from. I think those are the main 2 at the minute. I would say FSU, but unfortunately, obviously, Eddie Dennis has just retired. So wish him all the best, obviously. But it's one of those where it's like, damn, I've missed my chance. But yeah, I think those are the main 2 at the minute, which we look at and think that's the goal. That's the goal. If we could have a match with those 2, that would be that. Like I said, that's the next goal in the list.
Yeah, always good to have a list of goals. And I know last year you had a wee list of like what you've done in a year. You did 37 shows, 8 promotions, and we're already halfway through the year, surprisingly enough. What other promotions here in the UK, and maybe even abroad, are on your list, Adonis, to debut again?
I think I've got quite high goals now. I've hit a point where I'm working quite a lot of local promotions, and I've done really well to achieve that. And like I said earlier, this year I set myself a goal of 10 debuts. I've got 7 booked in, and I've done a few of those. So I only need 3 more to hit my goal, and we're in April, which is really good for me. I would love to work Riot Cabaret, which is the Tuesday night new promotion down in London, which based in Clapham, such a fantastic promotion. They're going to be one of the big players soon. And I think definitely your standards, your IPWs, your TNTs, your Progress, Rev Pros, though, that's the end result that I'd like to hit before, whether that's retirement or going abroad. I think I'd like to tick off the list of the UK first before I look elsewhere. But I'm open to anything. If things come up, then I'll take them. But I think those are the main few. Those are the main 4 or 5.
That's a good list there, my friend. And the UK wrestling scene right now is doing so well with everything going on. TNT are going to do a show with GCW later. Rev is doing great stuff. What does UK wrestling mean to you, Adonis?
Do you know what? Before I started wrestling, I would have said not a lot because I didn't really have that much investment or interest in it because I'd never really watched it.
Mm-hmm.
But from being a part of the scene, it's everything. You've got guys and girls that are working 5 days a week at their own jobs, doing whatever and wherever, all coming together on a weekend to just work different shows up and down the country. You've got guys that are taking no money to become wrestling promoters and put on shows so talent can have matches and boost themselves and promote themselves. And I think it's just, for everybody involved in it, it's just a brilliant thing. I think everybody's got to have their own community, and the wrestling community is quite a strong one. And of course, through COVID, we had the issues that we did, which set British wrestling so far back with the speaking out movement, where there was a lot of people that were dragged out of wrestling, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. And I think now it's in that rebuilding phase where we're now getting back to the heights that maybe we were sort of 5-6 years ago that, like I said, I wasn't massively involved in, but I wish I was now looking at it. Because I used to think, like, when you go and watch shows that would appear at your sort of local high streets or whatever, or in your civic centres, I just thought that it was maybe one group of guys that would just tour in the country, but it's not. It's obviously so many different promotions with guys that are just trying to make something of themselves and something in their life. So it's just a great thing for the community. I think whether you're obviously from up north, you don't tend to interact with a lot of the guys like us from down the south, but when you do, there's none of this divide. It's just straight, oh, you're a wrestler, brilliant, nice to meet you. And then you stay in touch through social media, and it's getting there. I'd like to say that we're getting there, but there's always work to be done to make it better and bigger.
Yeah, it's a never progressing field, Yeah. Always room for improvement, never stops at the end of the day. And, a big thing coming to the UK right now is AEW. They're bringing All In to Wembley Stadium. I want to know, Adonis, Tony Khan has said he wants to feature UK talent on it. If Tony Khan came to you and said, Adonis, I want you or even the Odyssey to come on, be on the show and face an AEW talent, is there someone in mind for yourself and the Odyssey?
FTR, without a doubt. If you're going to pick a tag team for the Odyssey, then it's FTR, isn't it, in the AEW roster? I think there's so many great tag teams. I mean, a childhood goal would be the Hardy Boys, but from current perspective, looking at it, it would have to be FTR as a tag team. And I know that Artemis will be happy with that because she runs around in an FTR shirt all the time. So I can tell you for a certain fact that would be her answer as well. On a personal level, I think Chris Jericho. Just because it's Chris Jericho. I don't think you need to follow it up with that.
No, obviously just Chris Jericho. Done.
Yeah. It's shooting to the stars, obviously, even thinking about that being a possibility. But, you can always have a dream, I suppose.
Yeah, it's always good to dream, my friend. And, some people are saying that, they're going to sell maybe 50,000 or 20,000. Adonis, what do you think AEW might? Do you think they'll be able to sell out Wembley? Do you think it's a real possibility? Because wrestling is, massive in the UK. People underestimate it.
Yeah, I think they'll easily get a high 70s, if not a sellout. I don't see any reason why not. I think a lot of that viewpoint comes from overseas in America because there is a big divide. It's very much territorial. You either AEW or WWE. I think over here in the UK, we love wrestling. We'll watch whatever's on. It's definitely seen as just brilliant for the wrestling world that you've got two major companies that are providing so much opportunity for different talents, especially when you look at the UK. A lot of the time, if you want to get signed and make the big leagues, you've got to move your life across the Atlantic over to America. And so I think they'll sell it out. I can't see any reason, unless they put ridiculous ticket prices like WWE did with Money in the Bank. Now, for them, they will sell out the O2 because there's 18,000 people that will pay those prices. But for Wembley Stadium, if they get it right, they could easily sell that out, no problem, without a doubt.
Absolutely. I'm hyped for it myself. I mean, I remember trying to get tickets for Money in the Bank, and I was gobsmacked how ridiculous this was.
I was fortunate enough to get tickets for Clash last September.
Oh, yeah.
And that was incredible. And even they were expensive at such a massive stadium. So to shorten that by a third of the capacity, They've got to make their money from somewhere. And, I don't know why, if they wanted to do it in England, why they didn't look at the Tottenham Stadium, Wembley. You've got so many big stadiums that you could have done it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like just a massive error. Do you feel like
Yeah.
WWE have just underestimated it or made a mistake?
I think they underestimated it because Money in the Bank out when they were going to do the SoFi Stadium in LA didn't go very well. So obviously they then had to reduce the arena size from that. I think that probably played a part in it, but I think they definitely underestimated the fact that there was so many fans, especially after how successful Clash at the Castle was. The success that had, you'd sold out nearly every ticket there. It was ram-packed with fans singing along to entrance music, which I'd never really heard on the TV before. So to be there live and watch it happen, I was going, is this what it's always like? Which obviously it wasn't. I think they've definitely made a massive error. And I think AEW have capitalized on that and gone, okay, you want to go big and bring your stuff over to London, we'll do it too. And we'll quintuple the size of the arena.
It's a big ball move, I'll tell you what. I mean, you mentioned Clash there, and I was there for it as well, and I truly loved the experience. But Edge was there, and the whole crowd singing along to Metalingus. That's going to memories stick with you.
It gives you goosebumps, doesn't it, really? I mean, for me, especially as an Edge fan, I would have been gutted if he was, obviously we'd know that the storyline progressed, but if he was still a part of the Judgment Day and had his other theme song, I think I would have been gutted that one of the last few times you'd probably get to see him live, he doesn't come out to Metalingus. But that was just incredible. I mean, I didn't have obviously like right up close seats, but you could feel every inch of the atmosphere. You could still get a clear view no matter where you were sat. I thought it was just brilliant. Like the whole event, start to finish, was brilliant. Even the pre-show match, which I think was Theory and Alpha Academy against the Street Profits and Madcap, I think it was, off the top of my head. Like even that match was fantastic for a non-televised pre-show.
It truly was a whole magical experience. And with Wembley coming up for AEW All In, they've got to put on a hell of a card. But Adonis, I got to ask, because the internet, as it is always buzzing with rumors. What do you think should be the main event of All In to really get that audience?
Oh, tough one.
Ooh.
I think they've got to go real big with it. I mean, I would like to see, I think MJF and CM Punk's the one that's being talked about at the minute, isn't it? I think that's the one that people want to see for the belt. And it does make sense. But I think that if you did, no matter what the title match is, I don't think it will be a letdown. But if you did a trios of the Elite against FTR and CM Punk, I think that would blow the roof off the place even more. Just simply off the basis of all of that heat and all of the issues that Punk had with the Elite to get us to this place. If he was to walk out the curtain and those two guys work amicably together and they all put on a great match, I think that would erupt the place massively.
Yeah, I think you'd probably be able to hear that all the way from Scotland.
Absolutely. And why not? Because if they did it right and they had, if they let everybody know that it was going to be CM Punk, but in a subtle way, the way they did with Cody Rhodes at Mania, everyone knew it was going to be Cody coming out to face Seth, but you didn't want to believe it until you saw it. If they do that, say FTR have got a mystery tag partner, I wonder who it could be. You've got the Elite in the middle of the ring, FTR on the ramp, and then CM Punk's music hits. That's the moment you want. That's the kind of moment that would get everybody talking about AEW.
Wow,
and not only just for the product of the match, but for, are these guys going to work together? Is that shot a stiff shot, or is it just working? How's it going to go?
Absolutely, that's going to be a hell of an experience if that does actually happen.
Yeah.
But you know what? Obviously, it's coming to the UK as well. Is there a particular UK talent you hope to see on the card?
I would love to see Cara Noir on the card. I mean, I've met Cara a couple of times now from doing ring crew shows and head coach at Play Fight. Unbelievable talent, hell of a talent, and a great guy even outside of the ring. I think that's the one that I would love to see there, because he's worked so hard. You can see that from his career, from carrying Progress, even up until now, putting on a hell of a show. I mean, he's a part of the first steel cage match in Progress history. And the storytelling that he can produce, and just his entrance alone will bring goosebumps on your skin. I think that needs to be seen by a much wider audience. And I think it's almost criminal that he's been out to Japan, come back, and he's massive everywhere. If you watch wrestling in the UK, you know Cara Noir. And for him not to have been seen by one of the bigger companies, to me, is criminal. But I'd love to see him there.
That'd be a banger, definitely.
Yeah, no matter who he's against, it'd be a banger.
Oh no, absolutely. The man can perform and take 0 to 100 any day.
And I think whether it's him or not, I'd love to see Charles Crowley there as well. A very good friend of mine, a mentor of mine, somebody that has been so impactful to my career that is literally just gone from 0 to 100. That's somebody that, with the amount of character he's got as well, he could work with anybody and put on a great show. And people talk about his character, which is absolutely fantastic, but his in-ring ability is just second to none.
Yeah,
second to none.
Second to none what he's done for TNT as well. It's an absolute hell. Is there someone you would love to see him face? Is there anyone in mind?
Like I said, I think he could work with anybody. I really do think he could work with anybody. I'd like to see the dynamic. I mean, if we're talking a realistic approach or a realistic card, I think if he was to come up against somebody like Hook, you're a straight-laced kind of rough-edged guy that's going to throw you around against, what he is, a twat, basically. He's going to come out and just mess with his head. I think that would be an interesting dynamic, but whoever he's against, he's putting on a show.
Absolutely, that's going to be a hell of a show. Adonis, I want to know, the future is never set in stone. You never know where you can end up. Is there a particular company you would love to sign with full-time in the future?
I mean, it's like I said, it's a shooting star kind of dream, that, isn't it? But from growing up being a big WWE fan, I think that's the big one. But I'll be honest, I would go probably anywhere really between the big two, WWE, AEW. Whatever's going to provide me with the best opportunity to grow and develop my own talent, which I'd love it to be WWE, but you've seen a lot of talent go out there and it hasn't quite worked out. But at the same time, you could say the same about AEW recently. A lot of talent's moved over there and it's not worked out. So I think one of the big two, just whoever's generous enough to take a chance on me would, eventually be brilliant. But like I said, you're talking a shooting star kind of dream there.
Very much so. You never know where the future may hold. Well, Adonis, I very much appreciate your time here on the show and telling us all your stories and everything. I very much appreciate it. But, to leave out our viewers, if they want to see you or the Odyssey, where can they see you guys?
So we've got quite a few places coming up. Mainly we're UBW Tag Team Champions, which is based in Bedfordshire. We're United Pro Tag Team Champions, which is Oxford. We've got a show coming up at Pro Wrestling East, which is in Cambridge. Ignite Pro in Boreham Wood. Jurassic Pro in Harwich. There's a lot of places, definitely more down south at the minute. I'll be at Tidal in Huddersfield next month in May, which is nice. I'm finally being able to branch out up north a bit more. But yeah, I think that anywhere really down south. I mean, if you follow the socials, then we'll be able to direct you to the right place wherever we are weekly basis.
Now, of course, and viewers, Adonis's Instagram link will be in the description of this YouTube video. You click there and follow him and see his journey. And hopefully you come up to Scotland, mate, and conquer the north, as they say.
I'd love to. I was actually born in Scotland as well, it's on my passport, I was born in Dundee. So my parents were in the RAF, so they were based in Dundee when I was born. So it would be nice. I mean, I'm not saying that it's home because I lived there for all of 6 months, but it would be nice to go north of the border for sure.
Well, let's get the Adonis Payne Scottish homecoming tour on.
Bring me home.
Exactly, pal. In the pub, a few pints of tenants, you'll be back in the Scotland.
That's it.
Well, hey, Adonis, I very much appreciate you. And viewers, remember to check out other episodes of the Soul Sessions. I've been your host, Soul. He has been Adonis Payne, one half of the Odyssey and the Conqueror. Stay golden, everyone.